Last night, we had the matchup between the Lakers and Pelicans kick off the play-in action as we had the 7-8 matchup winner with a chance to advance to the first round officially and secure a great reward of being able to play the reigning champion Denver Nuggets in the first round. Felt like there were a lot of unknowns headed into this game. LeBron and Anthony Davis were both game time decisions. Anthony Davis was dealing with back spasms in the last game of the regular season for the Lakers, and there was also this sort of conversation that was light but was sort of circulating about the possibility of the Lakers trying to purposefully lose this game in order to face off against the Thunder in the first round other than the Nuggets, which was a ridiculous theory really from the start, but was something that was talked about. This was Zion playing the biggest game of his career. He's never been to the playoffs before. This isn't technically a postseason game, so when you see the type of performance he has, no, it's technically not playoffs, but it was still a momentous occasion, had the weight of a playoff game, and he absolutely delivered. And then we still weren't sure what we were going to get out of Brandon Ingram returning from injury, just his second game back after missing just about a month with a knee contusion. And it was the Pelicans coming out hot in the first quarter before the Lakers really started running away with it during the second and third. In both of those quarters, the Pelicans came out extremely sloppy. We saw both of these teams sort of struggle in the half court, but the Pelicans were especially so, only scored 18 points or so in the second quarter, even less than that, 16 points in the second quarter, and their bad offense sort of translated to the Lakers being able to go on a couple of these significant runs. The Lakers were up by 18 points over halfway through the third quarter when Zion Williamson helped spark some life back into the Pelicans, and he really became the story of this game. He scored 10 points, I believe, in the first quarter alone anyways, so it's not like he wasn't contributing through the entirety of the game, but during this third quarter run is really when it felt like Zion was going to have this, statement moment in his career. And it really was a reminder of how far we've come with Zion, where during the in-season tournament, during the regular season, the Lakers and the Pelicans faced off during the knockout round, and LeBron was willingly taking the Zion assignment, played extremely far off of him, and Zion, when he was about 20 pounds heavier, not in as good of game shape, was much less effective. But Zion found a way to sort of overcome this disrespectful defense almost the Lakers were playing on him and use that space that they were giving him to his advantage. And he did so without having a real perimeter shot either, where I thought he did a tremendous job of getting involved in some two-man action that sort of compromised defenses, where he would set screens, he ran some dribble handoffs, and then would immediately roll to the basket after those. Again, involving that second teammate, sort of forced the Lakers to play up a little bit more, which gave both himself and his teammates lanes to the rim. He was extremely proactive in attacking some mismatches in his eyes, and I think one of the most notable things was the fact that Zion Williamson saw Anthony Davis as one of those mismatches time and time again throughout the course of the game. He was not afraid to take it at Anthony Davis, who is going to be on an all-defensive team. I had him on the first team. He's going to be a finalist for Defensive Player of the Year, and yet Zion did not care. He repeatedly went after him and was just driving through his chest and getting what he wanted at the rim. He also beat the Lakers in general, and a little bit LeBron specifically, on a handful of backdoor cuts, getting himself extra looks at the rim as well. So I thought this was just about as good as we have seen of a game from Zion, and just the activity, the energy that he brings. He helped ignite this Pelicans run at the end of the third quarter to go on a 19-8 run, get the deficit down to 7, and ultimately they sort of carried that momentum into the fourth quarter. Now, things did start out a little bit sloppy in that fourth, where Zion was on the bench. You had CJ McCollum and Brandon Ingram in the game for the Pelicans. They combined for 0 for 4 in those first few minutes. Both of them really struggled in this game in particular, but at the 7:38 mark, Willie Green decided to roll with a lineup of Jose Alvarado, Trey Murphy, Herb Jones, Zion, and Larry Nance. The group immediately went on a 9-0 run, and they were eventually able to tie the game at the 3:53 mark, where Alvarado hit Zion on a near half-court lob for a dunk. Zion then on the next possession caught Anthony Davis again in one of these switches where he drove right through him, hit a floater over him to put himself at 40 points. And unfortunately, that was the play that ended the night for Zion Williamson. He had to head back to the locker room after dealing with what's being labeled as a hamstring injury. It was very strange. It was very hard to tell what happened actually in that moment, but he was clearly grimacing. He was clearly very upset that he had to leave. This is a player who's very much been handicapped by injuries through the start of his young career. And from there, at that point, it's a tie game for the Pelicans, and things sort of started to fall apart for them, where Zion left the game. Willie Green decided to sub in CJ McCollum for a lot of those closing minutes. LeBron immediately backed down McCollum, forced a double team, and got himself to the free throw line. Now, CJ did end up scoring a couple buckets and assisting on a Trey Murphy drive that made his box score look a little bit better, but ultimately wasn't necessarily a great night for him. But I do bring this up because of the fact that a lot of fans were upset with the fact that Willie Green didn't play Brandon Ingram more in that fourth quarter. Again, it was just those first few minutes stretch of the beginning of the fourth quarter. And honestly, I didn't have a huge problem with the fact that Ingram wasn't in this game to close it, really. He was on a minutes restriction as it was because of the returning from injury. And frankly, the Pelicans offense, even dating back to his first game back when the Pelicans played the Lakers on Sunday in the regular season finale, it just hadn't looked very good through the first 7 quarters back with Brandon Ingram. Now, I absolutely don't say that to blame him in this scenario, but the Pelicans were really struggling, and this group that Willie Green was rolling out there pretty much checked all the boxes that they needed. They were extremely active on defense. They were pushing in the fast break and getting opportunities, and they had a level of spacing that really wasn't there when the Pelicans were rolling with their starting lineup. So, you know, Ingram, it looked like he was sort of a version of himself in that first quarter when the Pelicans offense did look good in the half court, but Ingram really cooled off from there. He finished 4 of 12 during the game as a whole. And again, when you're in that type of a situation, I feel like you have to stick with what's working. And that lineup that Willie Green had out on the court, the way that Herb Jones and Trey Murphy were both playing, I don't really know who you would have subbed Brandon Ingram in for in that circumstance. Now, once Zion left the game, there is definitely a conversation of you put Brandon Ingram instead of CJ McCollum. But again, outside of McCollum getting back down on that LeBron possession, I thought that he did fine, and I don't know how much more Brandon Ingram really could have done in that instance. But some of the offensive execution down the stretch was a little unfortunate for the Pelicans, where Herb Jones got a steal off of a deflection from a LeBron pass, and it seemed like Alvarado just sort of passed up on a layup attempt and instead tried to kick the ball out to the corner. That ends up being a turnover. He rolls his ankle. He took a beating in this game in general, but he ends up on the floor and he was slow to get back. The Lakers end up getting a 4-on-5 the other way. Reeves hits Anthony Davis for a lob, and then there was another instance where Larry Nance had a chance to tie the game when he was at the free throw line with 1:08 left in the game. He ends up missing one of those, and then immediately on the other side, D'Angelo Russell, who was really impressive in this game and has just continuously proven the doubters wrong throughout this, the last handful of months. Once his name was sort of thrown in those trade rumors earlier on in the year, he has been a different player, and he was terrific in this game as well, where Russell, he ends up going 5 of 11 from 3, 7 of 14 from the field, and scores 21 points, but he hits the corner 3 there to make it a 2-possession game with 51 seconds left, and the game wasn't actually still over even then. McCollum came back and got a quick little fade while in the paint to go to make it a 2-score game. And then the Pelicans forced the Lakers and LeBron James into a pretty bad shot with about 17 seconds left. But Anthony Davis grabbed the offensive rebound. It was pretty impressive. I know that I'm not going to break down the mechanics of rebounding too much, but just the length of Davis to be able to sort of go around Larry Nance and bring in that rebound. He gets himself to the free throw line and knocks them both down to essentially end that game. People were upset about the fact that Brandon Ingram wasn't getting these minutes in the fourth quarter. I actually thought the more questionable move was not having Jonas Valanciunas in the game for that final defensive possession, where as much as Larry Nance served a very key role in helping the Pelicans fight their way back into this game based off of the spacing, based off of the pace that he can play with, I thought that all of those minutes were justified, but Anthony Davis was also owning Larry Nance on the glass. He ends up with 6 offensive rebounds in this game and the dagger as a result of another rebound. Now, they subbed in Dyson Daniels for CJ McCollum prior to that possession. They could have put in Valanciunas as well, and I understand that playing this retroactive coaching game is never really fair, but the Pelicans did end up taking a timeout after those Anthony Davis made free throws anyways, and they could have subbed Larry Nance back in then, and again, they probably don't call the timeout if they do secure the rebound and they look for a quick shot on the other end, but either you get a good shot then, or Willie Green calls the timeout in the half court and the Pelicans can set up from there. Maybe I'm being too harsh there, you tell me, but again, I thought that that was the more questionable coaching decision from Willie Green in that situation. But again, Zion really was the story in this game, scoring 40 points on 17 of 27 from the field. That is a season-high points for him this year. He did his scoring in meaningful ways where it seemed like the Pelicans were a little bit dead in the water for a lot of that stretch, but especially in the third quarter, but he ignited the team and he was really the focal point of that offense, opened up opportunities as well for his teammates on the perimeter, made some nice defensive plays, including a big forced LeBron miss with a few minutes left as they were making their run to end up tying the game in the fourth quarter. And the injury is just extremely unfortunate. He's struggled with injuries through his career. A hamstring injury is not something that is uncommon for him. So we'll see. I do think that it does play in a little bit if you're going to be any sort of critical of Zion, which I'm not trying to be, but making sure that he comes into next season in better shape. That was something that he reflected on during the course of the year, that he felt like he let his teammates down a little bit because he wasn't at his 100% as the season started. But we did just get the report from ESPN's Adrian Wojnarowski that he is going to be out for their next play-in tournament game against the Sacramento Kings, ending his season. For the most part, we actually still, as I say that now, the Pelicans do still have a little bit of a puncher's chance. They're going to have home court once again against the Kings in their game tomorrow night, but without Zion and with a hindered Brandon Ingram, I do feel like the Kings are probably favored in that game, but who knows? We'll see. I do feel like with a healthy Zion, they could at least, make things difficult for Oklahoma City in the first round, because the winner of that game will advance to play the Thunder, and we'll get into the Kings part of this in the next segment. But again, just super unfortunate with Zion here. LeBron called him a generational talent in his post-game, actually, interestingly enough, which is something that we heard a lot about Zion coming into the league. But again, these injuries have gotten in the way. And, when you're getting that sort of recognition from LeBron James, that does mean something, at least in my eyes. But again, Pelicans going to be playing the Kings tomorrow night. We will be sure to touch more on that on Friday, but briefly here on the Lakers side of this, because I know I've spent a lot of the time here talking about New Orleans. This wasn't even really the most convincing Lakers game. That you can sort of spin it a couple different ways. I don't think they played their best necessarily, and they still won, but they're also going to need their best moving on to face the Denver Nuggets in this game. I don't think that, this can be labeled as a bad LeBron James game, where, especially when we talk about the fast break and the fact that the Lakers were really capitalizing on missed turnovers from the Pelicans, that's when LeBron James was really going into his field general mode and surveying the defense, getting opportunities for himself in transition at the rim, while also setting up his teammates as well. 6 of 20 is definitely not great. Now, he did have Herb Jones guarding him. I love me some Herb Jones. Definitely should be first team All-NBA in my eyes. So I do sort of defend. I think Herb Jones is a better defender than, especially along the perimeter, better than any player that the Nuggets have. I do like Kentavious Caldwell-Pope's defense as well, but Herb Jones is just on another level. So that's probably the toughest defensive assignment that he is going to face in this postseason run. But at the same time, it's sort of asking more out of those other guys. Anthony Davis, again, offensive rebounds were absolutely massive. It wasn't necessarily himself capitalizing on all those second chance points, but it was also finding teammates. He was just 6 of 16 from the field, almost all of his takes coming in the paint. Again, this is a team in New Orleans that does have a lot of size, not just Zion, but Jonas Valanciunas when he was in this game as well. And you got the contributions from some of these other players that you sort of expect. I thought that Rui Hachimura hit a couple big shots for them. D'Angelo Russell, obviously, the night that he had, super hot first quarter, and then had that massive three in the final minute in the corner to sort of put the game a little bit more out of reach. But it's just about the bench production for them. They really don't have the level of depth that you would hope from them. Taurean Prince and Gabe Vincent were the two players who got double-digit minutes for them in this game. Prince was just 2 of 7 with 6 points. Gabe Vincent was fine. I thought, he brings the defensive energy and he can knock down some shots from outside, but again, ever since they played a lot with their rotation this year, are we going to put Austin Reeves coming off the bench? Is it going to be D'Angelo Russell? And they still sort of staggered their minutes to some degree, but they're just very reliant on their starters. And another situation, like I mentioned, the half-court offense wasn't really great in this game. They're going to have to push it against the Nuggets if they want to have a chance, but the Nuggets are a team that is much more comfortable operating in the half-court. They'll probably try and slow the game down against the Lakers. We'll see if we have a little bit of a contrasting play style between those two teams, but I think that the Nuggets are the best team in the NBA in my eyes, so it is hard to pick against them, and I'm not going to be. I think that the Lakers, again, can make all of these games competitive like they did last year. Yes, it was them getting swept by the Nuggets, but did so in a very tight margin where every single game was close. I think the Lakers can steal one, but this is still a situation where I just think that the Nuggets are a better team. The Lakers, it's not fully ready to count them out here necessarily. I do feel like they can have one more push next year with the way they can retool some things, and we'll dive more into that as the offseason progresses. But as for now, I'm going to pick the Denver Nuggets in 5, but let me know what you think about this series in the comment section. For now, though, we are going to be taking our first break of the show, and when we come back, we're going to be diving into the Kings-Warriors matchup that took place later that night. So stick with us, and we will be right back.